If you ask most people what their number one fear is, what do you think it is? Most people's number one fear is public humiliation. I don't give a fuck anymore.
Mel Gibson is back, and he's not pulling any punches. After years of being blacklisted by Hollywood, he's now leading the charge against woke culture with his latest film, Sound of Freedom, which tackles the gritty issue of child trafficking.
Actually, I asked Mel to present this award to me for a reason, because when I couldn't get sober, he told me not to give up hope, and he urged me to find my faith.
Woke culture, believe it or not, didn't start as the creativity-crushing monster it's become today. It originally grew out of a movement for social justice, trying to bring awareness to inequalities and give a voice to the marginalized. Sounds noble, right? The problem is that somewhere along the way, it took a sharp left turn and morphed into something much bigger, much more controlling, and far more dangerous, especially for Hollywood. Today, it's no longer about equality or fairness. No, now it's about enforcing a specific ideology and punishing anyone who dares to step out of line. And guess what? Hollywood's at the heart of it all, and Mel Gibson, well, he's not having it.
If one of their priests utters something that resembles orthodoxy, well then they spring into action, they reprimand him, and they bully him and do their best to cancel him. And it succeed. They drum him out of the service, off he goes.
In his interview with John Lithgow, Mel hit the nail on the head. He likened woke culture to an orthodox priesthood where anyone not deemed sufficiently pure is banished. You know how it goes. You say one thing that doesn't perfectly align with the woke rulebook and boom, you're canceled. It's almost like some twisted version of church, but instead of sins, you're punished for independent thought. Mel's been through it himself. He's seen firsthand how Hollywood loves to prop you up, only to tear you down the second you go off script. In his eyes, the industry's become a playground for bullies who police every word, every opinion, every script.
His whole opinion about women on film, from beginning to end, is very brief. He says, women on film, either naked or dead. Both is better. And it's like, whoa! Ooh.
What's worse is how this culture is slowly strangling creativity. Mel has been vocal about how political correctness is stifling the kind of bold, unfiltered storytelling that made Hollywood famous in the first place. Filmmakers, actors, and writers are now more worried about ticking the right diversity boxes and avoiding controversy than actually telling stories that resonate with people. Let's be honest, when was the last time you watched a movie that wasn't force-feeding you some woke agenda? It's no wonder Mel sees this as a direct assault on the heart of cinema. The focus has shifted away from raw, real stories to making sure every production fits into a politically correct mold. That means fewer risks, fewer thought-provoking films, and a whole lot of predictable, watered-down content. And for what? So Hollywood can pat itself on the back for being inclusive while forgetting the very essence of storytelling, making people feel something real. Mel's been on the other side of this, and he's fed up with it.
The trafficking of children appears to be more pervasive than people have previously thought and are willing to discuss.
Now, this movie isn't your typical Hollywood flick. Forget the CGI, superheroes, and recycled plots that seem to be churned out every other month. This one is different. It tackles the raw and disturbing issue of child trafficking, a subject Hollywood seems to shy away from. And guess who championed it? None other than Mel Gibson. That's right, the man who refuses to bend the knee to woke culture back to film that brings to light one of the darkest and most controversial issues out there. Sound of Freedom is a gut punch of a movie. It's not pretty, it's not polished, and it doesn't care about making you comfortable. The film dives deep into the horrific world of child trafficking, particularly in Latin America, where children are kidnapped and sold like commodities. It's not the kind of story Hollywood likes to tell because, let's face it, it's too real, too gritty, and too difficult for the woke crowd to digest. But that's exactly why Mel got behind it. He knows the importance of telling the stories that matter, even if they don't fit into the glossy, sanitized mold Hollywood loves to promote.
It does feel different. I think because, I don't know, I think just because I've been around longer, it's different. Yeah. I'm more relaxed about the whole thing, because there's no point in being anything else.
Yeah.
right?
It's true.
So, you know.
And how did Hollywood react to this? They tried to bury it. Big studios didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. It wasn't on brand with their current narrative of feel-good activism wrapped up in politically correct packaging. Instead of backing a film that tackles real-world evil, Hollywood did what it does best. It turned a blind eye. They hoped Sound of Freedom would quietly disappear. But of course, they underestimated Mel and his team. Instead of backing down, they pulled off a brilliant move, opting for a staggered release across multiple countries. This wasn't just a smart strategy. It was a masterclass in how to keep a film alive without Hollywood's backing.
Sound of Freedom is smashing it at the box office and is being attacked continually by the mainstream. Is that because it's a box office success? Is it because of QAnon conspiracy theories? Is it because it's a new emergent business model? Or does the establishment have something more serious?
Guess what happened? Sound of Freedom crushed it at the box office. Despite Hollywood's best efforts to ignore or suppress it, people showed up in droves. The film didn't just spark interest, it sparked a nationwide conversation about child trafficking and, perhaps even more importantly, about why Hollywood is so scared of stories like this. I mean, why wouldn't they want to promote a film that shines a light on such an important issue? Could it be because it doesn't fit the woke agenda they're so busy pushing? It sure seems that way. The success of Sound of Freedom proves something Hollywood doesn't want to admit. Audiences are tired of being spoon-fed the same politically correct drivel. They're craving real stories, stories that challenge them and make them think. Mel's film did exactly that, and in doing so, it became a box office success and a wake-up call. It wasn't just a movie people watched, it was a movie that got people talking, asking why the industry is so reluctant to promote content that isn't wrapped up in their favorite social justice buzzwords.
These films are created out of moral panics, they're created out of bogus statistics, they're created out of fear, and with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites.
You'd think Hollywood, with all its loud talk about championing social issues, would be the first to rally behind a film like Sound of Freedom. After all, it shines a glaring spotlight on child trafficking, one of the most horrific crimes in the world. But no, Hollywood was dead silent. Why? Because Sound of Freedom didn't fit neatly into their woke narrative. It wasn't packaged with a politically correct bow, didn't have a preachy social justice angle, and let's be real, it wasn't another glossy agenda-pushing blockbuster. And Hollywood doesn't know what to do with a film that steps outside their carefully curated box of approved messaging.
Question and one we still have to grapple with. I mean, why are there 5-to-1 anti-drug agents in the U.S. government to agents who are fighting child crimes? It's not been a priority.
This silence is exactly what has Mel Gibson so frustrated. Here's a guy who has been in the industry for decades. He's seen how it works from the inside out, and he's called out Hollywood's hypocrisy time and time again. Mel's blunt about it too. Hollywood loves to cancel people who step out of line, but has no problem protecting its own when it suits them. They'll ignore the scandals of big stars if those stars are playing the right roles or pushing the right narratives. But the second someone like Mel speaks out against their precious woke culture, they'll try to erase you. Gibson's had a front row seat to Hollywood's selective outrage. He's pointed out, without hesitation, how they pick and choose who to destroy and who to protect. Look, Hollywood has its favorites, and as long as you're towing the line and ticking their boxes, you're golden. But if you challenge them, even a little, you're out. Mel's been on the receiving end of that treatment, and he's not shy about calling it what it is: hypocrisy. Remember when they tried to blacklist him? They dug up every mistake and personal issue they could to shut him down. But then, you've got big names in the industry involved in actual scandals, sometimes worse scandals, and the whole thing just gets swept under the rug. Funny how that works, huh?
Especially now. I mean, look, I think we've all been relegated to the area where we're sort of independent films. Am I right here? Mm-hmm. It's kind of independent filmmaking.
Interesting.
This is a whole new cinematic landscape. You don't have the luxuries that you used to anymore. I just did a film.
And this isn't just Mel being bitter, it's the truth. The woke double standards are real and they're on full display. Hollywood has perfected the art of the public takedown, but only when it suits their agenda. If you're outspoken and you dare to criticize the narrative they're pushing, you get canceled. End of story. But if you're one of their darlings, no matter how big the scandal, they'll either ignore it or quietly let it slide. That's what's infuriating. Mel Gibson knows firsthand how this game works, and he's frustrated that the industry that prides itself on being the voice of social justice turns a blind eye when it's convenient for them. Hollywood's furious with Sound of Freedom because it's a film that exposes a real-world issue, one that isn't glamorous or easy to digest. It's not a slick, woke-approved production. It's raw, it's real, and it makes people uncomfortable. And Hollywood doesn't like being uncomfortable. They'd rather stick to the superficial, virtue-signaling content that keeps them in the good graces of the Twitter mob. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.